Struggling to get the most out of your Google and Facebook ads campaigns? In this video, I'll show you how to supercharge your results using AppsFlyer. From seamless integrations to unlocking powerful insights, you'll see exactly how to turn your data into sort of game-changing decisions. Let's dive in. Now we're going to look at how to integrate both Facebook ads and Google ads in this video, and show you step-by-step some of the key elements you have to think about, some of the FYI, some of the caveats, and some of the issues you may run into. Now let's start with Facebook ads. As always, I'm going to share my screen and show you as much as possible. Now I am logged here to the AppsFlyer dashboard. This is actually a demo app, which can be fantastic because I can show you everything. Now in here, if we go to the Collaborate section, and then we look at the partner marketplace, we will find integrations for both Facebook ads, Google ads, and of course, a lot of other different ad networks, other tools like a Mixpanel, Amplitude. There's a lot of different things here. Now, we're going to start with Meta ads or Facebook ads. Just open it. Now, this is already integrated, but I get to show you a little bit what this might look like. So once you open this on your end, you're going to see this, just of course, without any values. And we're going to go through each step and explain what it does. Now, the first thing we need is a Facebook app ID. So let's see where we get this. Now, I am logged here at the apps inside the Facebook ads platform. The URL here is actually quite simple. It's just developers.facebook.com/apps. So if you log in, you might not see the screen. You might actually need to sign up and register for the developer program in the Facebook. But once you're going to go through the little sign up, terms of service, you're going to see something like this. Of course, you might not see any apps, but this is the app ID here, right? So I have one app here, and it's this number here, this 151379. That's the app ID. This is actually just a testing app I use in some cases. If you don't see the app, you can actually just create the app. Creating the app is actually not a lengthy process. It's actually not very complex. So let me show you a few things. So, we give it a name. Let's say, this is an AppsFlyer demo. Let's say here I type in my email. And then I wait to go forward. There's some use cases. Let's say we choose this one. You connect it to a profile and then you create the app. Now, I won't do this here. Let me cancel this. We already have the app we want. Now, sometimes the approval process might take up to a week, according to Facebook. Typically, I think it might only take a couple days, maybe even faster, but just a heads up on that. You might have a delay here just to get this approved. Now, if you already have the app, of course, we can continue on with the integration. So let's go back to our screen. So we have our app ID here. We enter it. Then we have a few settings I want to explain here as much as possible. Now, advanced matching simply means that AppsFlyer is going to send more PII to Facebook, like phone number and email address. Generally speaking, the more data you give Facebook and Google, the better the attribution model is. But there might be considerations here in terms of privacy requirements. You might be, let's say, a healthcare business, and you have very limited rules on how you can share PII. So you make that decision. Then we have another privacy-related requirement here around the CCPA. This is the California privacy law, very similar to GDPR, if you've seen that. And again, just more data sharing as well. This one typically relates to iOS 14 and IDFA. Again, you can kind of play around with this settings. I always find, you can enable them or not enable them and see what the data looks like. They're not going to be huge deal breakers, however, though, if you don't enable them. Then we have our windows. So we have our, the install attribution window, typically in days or hours. Then perhaps a view through window. We have recommendation from AppsFlyer, and you're also going to have your own windows inside Facebook ads. So you want to figure out what this might look like. In my experience, I find matching them across Facebook ads is nice because at least you're dealing with the same windows. You're going to run into discrepancies. There's a very high probability of that. The more changes that you can control to kind of reduce the discrepancies, I think is the better. So think about matching this attribution windows to what you have in Facebook ads. We have a reinstall attribution window. This typically, of course, looks at users who might reinstall the app, perhaps who install the app once and they come back. Do you want to count them and so forth? Re-engagement attribution. This is actually a very specific set and width in Facebook ads. And we have retargeting settings as well. Again, just typically windows around how do we deal with different scenarios. Then we have the in-app event postbacks. And these are the events that we're going to be sending to Facebook directly. So we can add as many events as we want. The install itself, of course, will be sent by AppsFlyer, but you can add other events here if you so want to. For example, we have some events that AppsFlyer tracks on its own, like the app open. Anything that has the AF underscore is typically an AppsFlyer default event. But we also have access to our own events, right? So if we wanted to add something here, add a custom event that we may be passing, for example, this purchase event is a custom event, we can then send it over. Then when we map it to the partner, we can use standard events or custom events. Again, generally, it kind of makes sense to use standard events as much as possible, especially because typically you are passing pretty standard things. You might be passing purchases or signups or trials or subscription started. There's likely a standard event for it. You may have seen this, right? The purchase, the level achieved, the activate app, and so on. Add payment info. These are all standard things. There's equivalents on the web. These are the mobile versions. If you don't see a standard event that sort of corresponds, and you prefer to send something that is custom, you can of course send that. Just keep in mind there are some limitations around how you optimize ads around custom events. Then we have a choice here if we want to send all the media sources, including organic, or just this partner only. This starts to kind of play around into the attribution model itself. That is, if AppsFlyer believes an install belongs to Facebook, they should send that, or should they send everything, even the installs that they believe belong to Google Ads, to organic, to a special one links you created. My general stance here is that, when it comes to this attribution models, what are effectively black boxes, both Facebook and Google, we kind of want to give it as much data as possible. So we want to send it all the data we have, even the organic installs, at least according to AppsFlyer, and then let Facebook decide which ones belong to them. Now we're going to see this a little bit more when we look at debate between SRNs and non-SRNs, self-reported networks versus not. But you have a choice here. So again, you can play around with this. In my experience, I typically just kind of send everything and let Facebook kind of do its best. If we want to send any kind of values or revenue. Again, if it's a purchase event, we typically want to send it because then Facebook will use this for optimization. If it's not a purchase event, then of course there is no revenue to send, and we can select nothing here. So again, this is just the events that we're sending from AppsFlyer to Facebook. This is sort of like the one way from AppsFlyer to Facebook, and of course, Facebook's going to send data back into AppsFlyer. This is a two-way integration. Down here, we have the scan. This is iOS related. There is a portion in the Events Manager where you can enter a URL here that AppsFlyer gives you, so you can select that. Again, if you just get started with iOS itself after 14.5, I might recommend not to use this right away. Kind of get comfortable with just the basic setup, and then use a scan network. It's just another way in which data gets attributed. So let's go back here. Let's look at a couple other things. There's no attribution link for Facebook. We're actually going to see an attribution link for Google Ads. But again, typically Facebook will drive installs to the app themselves, and then it kind of figures out its own conversions and then sends that back to AppsFlyer. We are able to bring cost data down, very helpful, because then you can actually see the performance inside AppsFlyer. To do this, you actually just authenticate with the Facebook account that you have access to business ads, and then you can start to bring the cost data in. You can see there's actually not a lot of settings here just to enable or disable altogether. So generally pretty easy to bring down the cost data, and then it also brings down some of the campaign data, and then you can see that in comparison to your conversions. Again, handy, not necessary, depending on where you report from. I have clients where we report directly from Facebook. So of course we get the cost data from Facebook, and we get the campaigns and the clicks and the impressions, and then we get the conversions from Facebook and then report from there. But if you want to report here, this is also an option. Then we have ad revenue. This is actually also a special Facebook ads feature. Let's enable it here. And it just simply kind of gives you more data from Facebook. Again, generally, if you have a mobile app in Facebook, there's some special features that you might have around it. So it kind of brings that data in. Again, not necessary for the sort of the basic integration. This is really all optional. Then we have Scan. Again, this is the special iOS reporting tool that Apple introduced after 14.5. You authenticate it to Facebook. You can integrate it right away if you want to, or you can wait and kind of see what the data looks like and then layer it on. And lastly, we have permissions around this integration itself. Some of it is just allowing Facebook to look at some data. And of course, there's also around allowing some other sharing of data across the integration. So again, nothing too complex. You probably don't have to worry too much about here. So generally, if you have the app ID, this whole integration can really take you just a few minutes at most. If you don't have the app ID, you might have to wait for that app to be approved by Facebook, which might mean it might take you a few days to get this set up. And then the data will start to flow here. Again, it's generally helpful to actually see what this data looks like in small campaigns before you ramp them up. So run a few smaller campaigns, kind of see what the conversions look like, how's the data look like inside Facebook ads, and so forth. If you go back here, once you're ready, you just simply activate the partner. Now this postbacks here, they will appear as events in your events manager inside Facebook. So whatever you map them to, so if it's a custom event, like in this case, then you'll have an event called AF app open inside your events manager. If not, you're going to have, of course, the standard event like a Facebook mobile purchase. So that's kind of how you see the AppsFlyer data inside Facebook from a conversion perspective. Now, the reporting itself, how it attributes, it varies, and typically because Facebook is what's called a self-reporting network. So let's look a little bit at what that looks like and how this kind of makes a difference. So here's a handy chart for how AppsFlyer typically goes through an attribution process here. This is highly simplified. There's a lot of complexity when it comes to mobile apps. I want to give you this sort of basic version to understand how self-reported networks behave versus non-self-reported networks. So let's imagine that we have an install, and down at the bottom here, we have the MMP. This will be AppsFlyer. Then AppsFlyer sends this install, and it's kind of want to figure out if any of the ad networks want to take credit for it. So perhaps it goes first to Facebook. and Facebook says, hey, you know what? We have never seen this user. This user has never seen any ads, so we're not going to take credit for it. Now, this is where the self-reporting versus non-self-reporting starts to kick in. Kind of Facebook gets the data, and then they kind of look into the black box and decide, is this one of us? Do we take credit for this conversion? Yes or no? So let's say Facebook says no. Then the MMP goes back and let's say goes to Instagram. Let's say it's still Facebook, but another part of Facebook. And then Instagram says, hey, you know what? Actually, this user did see an ad and we're going to take credit for it. Okay, so now we have credit at the Instagram level at the second touch point. Then let's say, MMP also kind of sends the data to Snapchat, and Snapchat says, hey, yeah, no, we also didn't see this user, so we're not going to take credit, okay? And then let's say we have a fourth touch point that this comes just from some kind of non-SRN. Could be a network. Network could be anything else really that doesn't self-report. This is when the user actually installed the app. So from AppsFlyer's perspective, from a last touch model, they will give credit to the last non-SRN because that's kind of what they saw. They did see, multiple touch points, but the fourth touch point is what gets the credit. However, this is where discrepancies can start to arise because in the AppsFlyer dashboard, the credit might go to this non-SRN, whatever that is. But Instagram also took credit. So if you look at the Instagram data, then there'll be one more conversion there that might be in the AppsFlyer dashboard. Now, highly simplified, there's a lot of things that go into play here, but what's important to know, especially about networks like Facebook, Google Ads, I'm going to see a few of the SRNs, is they can sometimes be a bit of a black box. AppsFlyer kind of sends them the install, and then they come back and say, yeah, this one belongs to us, or no, it doesn't belong to us. But what goes on in that black box, who knows, right? They're looking at IP address, device IDs, user IDs. They have their own sort of wide range of IDs of users that they have access to, especially, companies like Facebook that has billions of users across multiple devices. Same with Google. So SRNs will self-report whether something counted as a conversion or not, but the AppsFlyer attribution model may give credit to that or it may not give credit to that. Now, this is not really an issue to be solved. This is just the challenges that come with attribution model in general. And it just simply means that the AppsFlyer is one opinion on how your conversions are broken out. Facebook is another opinion. Google is another opinion, and so forth. You're going to have to do some work on your end to sort of clean up and how you manage your campaigns. And again, you're not going to get 100% clarity or truth on your ads. This is not a 100% scientific process. There's a heavy amount of art to figure out how you attribute conversions. Now, I mentioned this SRN versus non-SRN. It may seem a little obscure, but I do that because actually the bulk of SRNs are actually quite popular. If you look at this list from AppsFlyer, you'll recognize most of them right away. We have Apple Search Ads, Google Ads, of course, Facebook Ads, Snapchat, there's TikTok, there's X, there's Yahoo. So a lot of the big digital platforms are SRNs. So this will affect you in a high probability unless you only use non-SRNs. Now, for good measure, let's open the documentation here in AppsFlyer for the Facebook Ads integration, look at some of the things that can go wrong, and I'll give you some of the things I have seen go wrong as well here. So first, we have the IDFA collection. This is, of course, for iOS. After 14.5, you have to manually set up your app to collect IDFA. This is a little pop-up, right? The apps ask you if you want to be tracked or not tracked. If the user says no, then there's no IDFA, and this is not sent to Facebook. Now, there was some period where Facebook had issues with this, maybe about a year after this change. These days, Facebook doesn't really have a lot of issue with a lack of IDFA, but just so you know, the app has to be tweaked. Ideally, you want to collect the IDFA if possible. So there's things you can do to sort of prompt the user to encourage the app tracking play. Even if you don't have it, some networks are not going to be as heavily affected. Some of them are pretty basic things, like the wrong Facebook app ID. Okay, fair enough. Let me see. Of course, you need the right type of sort of meta ads campaign here, right? This has to be a mobile app install campaign. Now, a few other things as you deal with discrepancies, of course, keeping this SRN versus non-SRN, it will save you a lot of time. I have spent a lot of time kind of going down rabbit holes trying to figure out discrepancies. It is not fun. So you just want to be able to manage expectations for what this data might look like once you get up and running. Check time zones. Sometimes this is a minor thing that can play a big thing. If you have different time zones across AppsFlyer and Facebook ads and Google ads, make sure they all get the same data. So typically, if you're going to send all the data, including the organic installs, make sure you do the same for both Facebook and Google and any other sort of SRN that you work with. If you're not going to send all of that, you're only going to send the installs that belong to them. You want to do the same as well. You probably also want to double check the number because you might end up with very low conversions if you only send the ones that belong to them based on that very simple scenario we went through with the different touch points. Also keep in mind that Facebook ads has some limits around the data export. For example, if you take this data out to something like an amplitude or mix panel, typically Facebook has privacy limitations, so you won't be able to see this data appear in your data export. Again, you want to sort of play around a little bit with this, but just so you know, there's basically a lot of FYIs and caveats, and some of them are not really going to make sense until you actually see the data yourself, and you compare two reports and you say, hey, we ran this campaign, we spent $20,000, here's how many conversions Facebook said we had, here's how many AppsFlyer had, let's kind of figure out what some of the issues might be, and then sort of come to terms with the discrepancies. One more thing before we move on for Facebook, just double check your settings. Of course, make sense across both apps if you have both iOS and Android. Sometimes the settings are the same and sometimes they're a little bit different. So just double check, just basically, right here when the iOS app, we then want to open the Android app and switch into that. And if we look at the Android app, we can see actually it's just a little bit differently, right? So we have the app ID, we have this install refer decryption key. This decryption key, you can actually get it from the app settings inside Facebook. So if you actually open the app and then go to app settings basic, then down here you get a chance to add platforms, for example, Android platform, and then you get access to this decryption key, and then you give that to AppsFlyer. And it just means that some of the install refer data that you get from Android, that I guess Facebook gets from Android, it's encrypted, and the decryption key then allows AppsFlyer to decrypt it. Again, it's a very simple process, might take just a couple minutes, and then your data will be fine. All right, let's see if this differs in any other major way. Again, we have postbacks, same thing. Typically if you have both an iOS and Android app, you want to make sure the postbacks are the same. So if you have 3 events in one, you want to have the same 3 events match to the same events, either custom or some standard event. And of course, the same sort of settings, either all media data, all media sources, or just this partner only, and then values and revenue. Again, just some parity. And then everything else is the same across the board. So again, you have 2 sort of integration pages for both the iOS and Android app. If you have 2 apps, if you have more apps, of course, you're going to have more settings. So just making sure they're all the same and any special settings that might differ between them. But that's the Facebook integration here for AppsFlyer. Before we look at the data in AppsFlyer, let's actually look at Google first, and then we'll kind of bring it all together, both of them at the same time. So Google Ads, we're in the same page, right? So again, let's look at what we need here. So we need this link ID. So this link ID comes from Google Ads. So let me show you how to create that. So when you log into Google Ads, if you go to Tools, and then you go to Data Manager, you're going to end up in a page like this. You're going to have all the different products that might be connected to your Google Ads. Of course, you're going to see a lot of Google products like a Google Analytics, but you can then have third-party app analytics. This is where AppsFlyer falls. So if we go here to the Manage and Link. So here we have all the links that we have created. Actually, this account has both segment.com and actually has 2 links for AppsFlyer. So what we're going to do here is we have to set up a link, and we do that by creating here. Then we choose the app analytics provider. You can see there's a few options here. You can just choose other provider if you don't see it here, but we do have AppsFlyer right here. Then you select your platform, whether Android or iOS, and then it kind of gives you a search bar down here. This search actually searches through the App Store. Now, if you have your developers handy, they can give you an ID or an app name or a package name, but you can also just type it out. So if you actually search something like, I don't know, Uber, you'll actually find a bunch of apps that sort of matches it. So eventually you want to go here, find your app, put the name if you don't know any special IDs. Then you'll find it, you select it, and then you do this twice, of course, one for Android, one for iOS. And you're going to end up with something like this, right? You have 2 links. You have this will be the app ID for each app store, whether iOS and Android. There's a status for active, and then it gives you this link ID. This is actually a long string. You can then copy this over back to AppsFlyer. And down here, you can actually, regenerate the link ID if you have to do it for some reason and so on. So this is actually the whole link process. So very simple. Again, as long as your apps are already published, then you have no issue. You can just create a simple link. So we're back here. So we enter our link ID, no problem. Then we have some options here. We have a first deferred deep linking with Google Ads. Again, this is something very specific to how sort of Google Ads may handle deep links. So you want to just double check the documentation for that. Again, if you're not in the EU, then you might select this. This typically means though that you have no users in the European Union. You just want to double check that this is actually correct. You may have a very small minority of users, maybe 1%, but that still means you have EU users. This just comes down to privacy requirements. Again, like we saw before with the Facebook ads. Then we have the same windows, right? The same install attribution windows, view through windows, reinstall, re-engagement. Again, you probably want to make sure this matches what you see in Google Ads as much as possible. It might help you reduce discrepancies in the future. And then we come back again to the same event postbacks. Again, it's kind of sending the events into Google Ads. Google Ads, of course, also has its own sort of standard events, as you can see here, right? The sort of session start, the in-app purchase, and some of the other ones that you have available. And of course, they have custom events that you can pass on. My understanding is that Google Ads actually has no issues with custom events like Facebook. So in this case, you can do sort of whatever you want. But again, generally good practice that if there's a standard event that you want to use, like a purchase event or some sign up event or so on, you probably want to use that. And we have the same settings around, do we want to just send data for this partner only, all or media sources, and the values and revenue. Let's go back up here. Let's see what else we have. So under the attribution link, we do have this here for Google Ads. It just means that we can add this sort of custom dynamic attribution link to our Google Ads campaigns. And all this is doing here is kind of helps you build the link. This is kind of like a URL builder. So we're actually mapping some of the specific things that AppsFlyer cares about, like campaign ID, ad set name, and so on. And specifically the names AppsFlyer uses internally for tracking this. And it maps them to the dynamic parameters that Google Ads will change in the ad itself. So you can add as many as you want here. You may have a custom window if you care, and then you get this link here, and this link you can then add it in your Google Ads campaign. And of course, Google Ads is going to dynamically replace a lot of these values and then pass them into the sort of structure that AppsFlyer expects. You don't have to use this necessarily, but it's, again, a handy way to help connect these two tools and make sure they are as much in sync as possible. Then we have cost data, just like Facebook. We can bring this down. We actually, again, authenticate with our Google Ads account. And then we bring it down. Not a lot of settings here, just enable, disable, and it'll bring down the cost data in the same manner. Ad revenue is not an option for Google Ads. Scan is also an option. And again, we authenticate in the same way we do for Facebook. And then we have permissions. Very similar way to what we had before with the Facebook ads. Okay. So overall, pretty straightforward. And again, typically once you already have everything else set up, then again, this might just take you a few minutes to set this up completely. We have, of course, an Android equivalent. Let's go look at that real quick. So this is the Android version. It looks pretty similar. Let's just scroll down here. Again, we probably want to match the postbacks, make sure they are almost the same across both of them. Interesting enough, the attribution link is actually only available for the iOS app. The Android app does not use attribution links. Google, I believe, has a much better integration with Android, so you're still going to get the data flowing in, but just an FYI. Cost data, ad revenue, permissions, that's all the same across Android. So again, very straightforward. Let's look at some caveats here with the Google Ads, just to be aware of those. First, I want to highlight some of the special parameters that Google Ads uses. We, of course, have G-Click. G-Click has been available for a very long time on the web, but Google Ads, or Google really introduced it on the mobile side in December 2021. They also added a couple other ones around iOS 14.5. This is the G braid, and there's a W braid. Typically, these parameters are added automatically by Google. Not really a lot of work to do. In some cases, it might be helpful to actually capture them on web if you see them, and then store them in a sort of single profile in your backend database. But AppsFlyer will capture them. There's no action needed to capture these parameters. I actually want to make you aware of what they are. Sometimes, for example, I've done offline conversions in the Google Ads, and you cannot do offline conversions unless you have the G-Click. Okay, the other thing I want to show you is how this data sort of looks in Google Ads. When you create a conversion in Google Ads, those postbacks that we were sending will be available here. If you actually go into the fourth option, and then you look at the third app analytics, that's where we were, of course. So you get something like this, right? You have an event that you can then import into your Google Ads and then use that in your campaigns itself. We can see this one actually comes from AppsFlyer. It shows you activity. I have hidden some stuff around the app and the conversion action just for privacy reasons. But this is where the events come through from the AppsFlyer perspective. So this is where the postbacks will appear. You then import those into Google Ads. Again, ideally, when they want to use those in your Google Ads campaigns, it just kind of creates that sort of link in between both of them. And that starts to create that bidirectional integration here where AppsFlyer sends data to Google Ads. Of course, Google Ads is a self-reporting network, so it will then kind of send back some data on its own. And then from there, the attribution models on both sides will kind of figure out what conversions belong to who. One funky note about Google Ads is Google Ads actually not only is a self-reporting network, so it'll take credit or not from its little black box, but it actually also does partial credit. So they may come back and say, you know what, this conversion, this install belongs to us, but we only want to take 33% credit because we think this is, a second touch or third touch and so on. So in your data itself, in your conversions, you might actually see like decimals in your data, which is a really fun conversation to have when you're trying to explain how Google Ads drove, 100.45 conversions and, what is 0.45. But nonetheless, this is just how Google Ads kind of does conversions, and just something to keep in mind when, again, you're comparing discrepancies across both providers. Finally, let's finish by just seeing how the data looks inside AppsFlyer. We know that Google Ads and both Facebook ads are going to do their own reporting, and if you pull directly from them, then you deal with that. But we can see how actually AppsFlyer is reporting all these conversions in their own dashboard. So this is just the home page. Down here, we have a bunch of sort of built-in reports, around installs and non-organic installs and so forth. But let's actually scroll down all the way to the bottom, and we get the data broken down, in this case by media source and then campaign. And here we see Facebook ads. Down here, we see Google ads. This is Google AdWords. This is how it appears. And we see, of course, a few other ones like Apple Search ads and so forth. If we open Facebook ads, then we get some other data around the campaign itself. And then here, we see total number of installs, reattributions, re-engagements. We see some impressions, clicks data, cost data. Again, this is kind of being brought in from Facebook. Revenue data, and of course, a return on investment. And it kind of does a comparison across all the sources that AppsFlyer has access to, not just the ad networks, ad integrations, but any kind of special one links that have been created that are used in some kind of way, track blog posts, track emails, push notifications, in-app notifications, own media. So I find the great benefit here of AppsFlyer is you get a more holistic picture as to what's going on. Facebook ads might tell you that, from their perspective, over this date range of 7 days, they saw, 15,000 installs. Which is, again, it's just their attribution model, their black box. But the same number of installs may get broken down slightly differently here in the AppsFlyer campaign. Again, neither right or wrong, just a different attribution model for your data. But once you tag everything properly, especially around the own media that you have and the special ad networks that you might be using, whether they are SRNs or not SRNs, you can get a very complete picture right away as to how all your installs are actually breaking down here. And of course, if you have custom events, you can then add those custom events here. So you're not only seeing installs, you can actually add events like this, right? Here's like, this is a custom event or a purchase event and so on. So you can even go down the funnel and say, not just, how the installs were broken down across sources, but how are the signups and the trials and the purchases and the subscription started and so forth. And you get a very quick overview of your return on investment, your return on ad spend. This can all be done here. And of course, there's ways to kind of break this down further, perhaps go down to ad set or ad level if you have that, if you're tracking that, show this data a few different ways. And again, a lot of the stuff is sort of pre-built for you. The heavy lifting in AppsFlyer is all about how you make sure all the data is being collected and ingested properly, and you're integrating correctly with the different ad networks, ad partners, and whatever other integration you might have. And once you do, then AppsFlyer will kind of start doing its own magic with its own attribution model to kind of show you how your data breaks out over any specific date range. Quick note before we finish this video, I would like to thank AppsFlyer for sponsoring the video. AppsFlyer is one of my go-to mobile attribution tools. I've been working with the tool for several years, and it's been fantastic to work with the company itself to, of course, figure out the best ideas here and create these videos for all of you. That being said, make sure to check out AppsFlyer, their documentation, their website, and of course, their product. And that is all I have for this video. My name is Ruben Ugarte. I'm an expert in data and of course, MarTech. Now, we looked at a few things. Of course, we saw how we can integrate Facebook ads and Google ads. Typically, integrations might take just a few minutes. As long as you have everything handy, you might need to wait, most likely on the Facebook side, if you have to create the app, or perhaps on Google Ads side if you don't have the right permissions. But typically on the AppsFlyer side, it's pretty fast and pretty standard. Again, once you run some campaigns, you'll start to see how this data kind of breaks out and get more comfortable with it. But very robust, bi-directional integrations with both Facebook ads and Google ads, and of course, a host of other ad networks and ad platforms that follow very similar steps. And then we finish by just seeing how this data actually looks inside AppsFlyer and how this sort of holistic picture across all your touch points, whether owned media or ad networks or anything else, can be seen in a single place, and then you kind of see all your data and then the return on investment, down funnel metrics, and so forth. So a very powerful way, and this is sort of the big benefit for a tool like AppsFlyer. It's just a single place that can give you a much complete look as to what's going on from a marketing perspective. Now, if you're looking for another video to watch, I highly recommend you watch the actual AppsFlyer tutorial I recorded a few weeks ago. This is about 45 minutes to an hour long. It actually looks at all the steps that are needed to integrate AppsFlyer from start to finish. So this is just one portion. And of course, there's some things you need to do before you ever get to this place. So highly check out for that video. It'll be right here for you on the top right. And until next time, we will talk soon.